Hello.
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 Hey.
Hello. Hello there.
Hey guys. Okay, so welcome back. I hope you had a good evening. So maybe the initial shock of Unreal maybe has settled down a little bit. Hopefully. Because now we're going back in, baby. So let's see. Let's open it up. Go to Visual Studio. Go to fuck.sln. Yeah, baby. Are there any like pressing questions that you have from yesterday? Like anything that you still feel was unclear that you maybe want me to explain again, or like explain in a different way, or do you just want me to just keep going?
Our atmosphere.
Sorry?
I mean, I'd like a little recap, like how to close and recompile, and however you added like that actor again, just
Okay.
quickly if you can, like 5 minutes.
Yeah, sure. So here's our game. Oops. So yeah, I usually start from the editor. So I usually open up in Visual Studio and then just hit F5. Just so that I have debugging, so I will be able to breakpoint, and it will break in Visual Studio if I hit an error or something. It crashes. So that's usually how I do things. So then if it starts to bug out with the live recompile, I can just hit like Control Shift F5, which is this restart here. So like it's just restart, which means it's just like shut down, recompile, and then start back up again. So that's usually how I do things. Actually at work I don't even bother with the live compiler at all. I just do a change and I just do Control Shift F5 right away, so I don't even try.
And Control Shift F5, was that the thing that just restarted the entire engine?
Yes, so it's this button here. It just restart, which is just like shut down, recompile, and then start back up. So yeah, when you F5 from Visual Studio, like you are in control of the process. So like this process is started from Visual Studio, the whole engine. Which means that we could breakpoint in the engine, right? We could go into the engine source and just break somewhere in here if we wanted to, which is cool. But that means like if Visual Studio was to shut down, then that means like we will stop debugging, which would shut the engine down as well. So we are like in ownership of the process when we start from Visual Studio like this. Like, what is this? What do you think this is? What do you think when someone when someone modeled this? What do you think they had like as a like? What would be the use case of this thing?
It's art, Emil.
It's okay. It's art.
Yeah.
Sure.
You wouldn't get it.
That's what they call it these days. Oh, okay, cool. So this is great. Like, you know, when we are attached like this, then we get these ensures. So ensure, I can say that real quick. An ensure is like an assert. It will check this this first expression here. So this is the Boolean expression, and it's assuming it should be true. So the ensure will check if this is true, then you just like return true essentially. Then you just like keep going. But if turns out to be false, then show this little error message here. So if I go into like my output here, then I can see that here we have like an error message that showed up in our little thing. So like, ensure condition failed, and there's the condition and so on. Not super helpful usually, but good to know. And then it also breaks if we are in code. So, you know, you see it's debug broke here on this line. So that's very helpful. So this is good to like double check things like that. This is supposed to be true. This is supposed to be true. This is supposed to be true. If this is not true, then something has gone wrong. So yeah, so that's an ensure, also called an assert in some other engines. Great. So here's our game, and I'm actually gonna go ahead and set this map to be our default starting map, so I don't have to go in and do that all the time. So I'm just gonna go into here, maps and modes in project settings. So I go into settings, project settings, the maps and modes. Then here we have the editor startup map. So I'm just gonna set that to be our cool map. So I don't have to go in and load it every time.
Emil, real quick, did you remember to start the recording?
Yes. Thank you. Excuse me, Jesus. I remember once in a while I meet the person who's like, "Can you please stop burping?" And I'm like, I can't. I don't know how to not burp. I just have to get it out of me.
It's taken all of my self-restraint not to do that.
Not to burp or not to tell me not to burp?
The second one.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Why not both?
I'm sorry.
It's easy. Just puncture the stomach.
All right. So yeah, on the second one, let's do that as well. Just to quickly recap how to make a new actor. So there's two ways of doing it. There's the Unreal way, which is going into engine. Oh, sorry, not engine. Here, C++ classes. Going in here, right-clicking and doing new C++ class. That's like the Unreal way of doing it. To do that, and this will create it in code and remake the project files for us. So that's one way. So you just click actor here, and then you'll get the name. Don't need to touch any of these. Don't touch these. And you just set the name and so on, and then create class. That's one way. And then there's the hacker old school way, the cool way, the sunglasses way, which is going into here and just creating the files manually. So it's go in here, go into fuck. They go into source and then fuck. And then you just create the files here manually. So this is what I usually do. But I'm not saying this is better or worse. That's just what I like to do. It's up to you. So let's say we want to do it the Unreal way. Let's just like do an actor. I call it Bouncy Boy. Oh baby! So you just create the Bouncy Boy. And what's nice about creating it the Unreal way is that it actually adds some of the functions for us. It will add like the constructor. It will add like a tick and a begin play. So it's very nice in the beginning to have those definitions made for us. So that's kind of nice. I'm actually not sure what will happen here because we're broken. Oh, okay. So this is actually bad. So what's gonna happen now is that it remade the project for us, which means that if we open up Visual Studio, then it's like, oh, it's been reloaded or it's been changed because Unreal changed it for us. And if we hit reload all here, it's gonna say like, oh, to do this you have to stop debugging. So then it's gonna shut down the engine. So I guess we're gonna have to type no, and we're gonna say like, no, we don't want to actually reload the product. So that's fine. So you can just type no, we don't want to reload. But then here we have our Bouncy Boy little actor made here, so that's cool. uClass generated.h, generated body, everything's already there, so you don't have to worry about it. And then let's just add like a static mesh. So let's add a use static mesh component. Mesh. Again, we have to make that U property. And we should add something. We should add a specifier, right? Do you guys remember this? We should have a specifier for our property. Do you guys remember what specifier that was for components?
We want them to be visible.
Visible where?
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Anywhere.
Visible anywhere.
In the editor.
Woo!
Visible only during build.
Great. So we made a mesh component, like at least a variable. We haven't made it yet though. Do you guys remember what do I do to actually create the components? What function should I do that in? What function should I be working with?
Create default sub-object.
Exactly. Create default sub-object. Very good. And then what do I put in here? In the crocodile mouths?
Object type.
Yeah, and what's the object type?
Use static mesh.
Yes. Use static mesh what? You just use static mesh?
Use static mesh component.
Yeah, because what's a use static mesh?
An actual mesh, like asset.
Yes, exactly, very good. So use static mesh components. Exactly. And then what do I type in here?
Text and then parentheses and main.
What is the parameter? What is it expecting? Like what does this mean? Do you guys
we
remember?
wanted a Unreal type string to name it.
Yes, exactly.
So
And
it's
so I just
text
type it in
and
here,
then-
right? Like this, mesh.
so
That's-
you first type text in large in capital letters before that
Why do I have to do that?
to convert it to a Unreal text type from a normal string.
Yes, exactly. So this will convert it from a C string, like an ASCII string, to a wide sharp pointer. So that's what the text is for. Very good. And then I'll just save it to the mesh. And then, if we want to be good citizens, we want to do one more thing. And what's that? Do you guys remember?
Root component.
Yes, exactly. We want to set the root component. Fantastic. So now if we go in here, we should be able to, if we hot compile, we should get our bouncy boy. There it is. And maybe I did it a bit too fast. If we hot compile, dragging a bouncy boy. Oh, there we go. I did it like mid compiler or something. Okay, so I'll set the static mesh to be something. Let's do a as cube. Yeah, sure.
I'm assuming if you add like a default subject object, an actual mesh, it will just give an error. Because that's not valid.
I think so. I'm not sure. This default subject, it feels dangerous. It feels like you can do like crazy shit with this. But I'm assuming it would be like, what are you trying to do here? What do you mean you're creating a static mesh as a sub-object? It's like, that's weird. So I think so, yeah. So hopefully that would throw an error.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, let's see. Let's play, and it works. And let's just make it physics, right? So let's make it so that this will actually simulate physics. And to do that... So here's a tricky question for you guys. If I were to simulate physics, right? Would that be a function on the actor, do you think? Would it be like a set actor simulate physics? No, I don't think there's a function like that. Do you guys remember why?
Because the actors don't have physics. That's for the components, right?
Yes, very good, very good. The actors do not have any physics, any collision, any sort of anything like that. That's on the components. The components are the ones that have physics and collision and that sort of thing. So we actually have to do on the mesh. We do set simulate physics. True. So now if we play and compile first, because we're on the AIM script, and play. And compile again. And play. Fucking god damn it! Work with me! Okay, bouncy boy. Drag another one. Make it a cone. Hey, there we go. Hooray. We have a physics.
Hey.
Age. So there we go. So that's how to create an actor in 5 minutes. Very cool. So I thought today we were gonna actually look at the player a little bit. We've looked at actors, so we kind of understand like what's an actor, how does it work, what are components, what are those there for, and stuff like that. So now that we've done that, now we can actually level up a little bit, and we're gonna make a character for the player. So right now, if I'm playing, like we have sort of a player, but they are this default. Excuse me. We have this default debug camera player, which is like what Unreal spawns if there's no if there's no like character specified. So what Unreal uses for these sort of things is that we have two concepts. We have a concept of a player controller. So let's just draw this out. Make a new here. No. We have a player controller. And you can see that as the soul, right? That is what receives input from the system. It is what handles sort of player-specific data if you have those sort of things. So it's not an actual actor in the world, or okay, it is, but don't worry about that. It is an actor, but don't think about it like that. You can see that sort of just an abstract object that receives input, and then that can possess. I don't know how to spell that. Possess. Is that how you spell possess? Is it 2 S's? That's how you spell it, I think. Whatever. It will, it will possess something called a pawn. So you can see that a pawn is sort of like the body, right? So it's the thing that's moving around in the world. It's the thing that's interacting with things, and so on. So the player controller is the soul, and it will possess a pawn, and that's the body. And this is the engine. This is the the structure that Unreal is using for everything that's controlling things. So it's the same for player controller, and then we have stuff like AI controllers, which is also the soul that possesses pawns. That's the body. So that's the way they've chosen to structure their engine. So a player controller is a soul that sends input to a pawn, and a pawn is the thing that's moving around. Great. So that's the way it works. So right now, if we go into the game mode, the game mode is the thing that's specifying which player controller are we spawning, which type of player controller that is, which type of pawn are we gonna spawn by default, which type of game instance, all of these default classes. So if I just go into maps and modes here, you can see here default game mode. Whoop, oh, I pressed some buttons I shouldn't have pressed. Oh, I searched for 2.2. Here, default game mode, we have game mode base, okay? And if I just click this like selected game mode, I just like expand that a little bit, we can see here, okay, default pawn class, this is default pawn, okay, good. HUD class, it's the class we use for the HUD. Player controller, which class to use for the player controller. Game state, yada yada, spectator, play state, whatever. So it's the game mode is defining these sort of default classes to spawn when we start the game. So that's when we start the game, there is no pawn in the level. All we have is just this like player start here. And what's happening when we play is that it's spawning the pawn class, so there's a default pawn here, it's spawning it at the player start. Then it's spawning a player controller, and then it's possessing that default pawn with the player controlling. So that's happening when we start the game. So that's why there's no player controller placed in the level, it spawns as we start the game. Oh my god, he's fucking wrecked this place. It's crazy. Okay, so that's how it works. That's like the Unreal structure. And you know, it's not like you have to do this. Like at Hazelight, we completely ignore this system. We completely ignore the concept of a player controller and a pawn. We sort of, okay, it's spawned, and then we sort of take the input from that and just do our own thing. We just feed it into like an actor, and then we make our own sort of player, actor, and everything like that. So we completely just reroute everything to ignore this system. So it's not like you have to do this, but Unreal kind of wants you to do this. Like, you know, to reroute stuff, you have to really get into code and, like, you know, really start hacking around to get around this. So we won't do that now. We'll sort of work with Unreal to use these things. But I just want to say that these aren't hard set rules, but they are more of a suggestion. Like, these are the default way that they've set it up. So it's still good to know how sort of this works. So that being said, if we want to make like a character that works a little bit differently, maybe we want to have like, so you can like jump around, like have maybe like a first-person shooter kind of thing. Then the first order of business is probably to override this this pawn class to make our own pawn that has like gravity and we can jump up on stuff and has like a capsule and stuff.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
So what would you say is the difference between a pawn and an actor in that case? Because you said a pawn can also be like AI controlled, right?
Mm-hmm. There really is no difference. You can possess anything. Like, you can possess like this cube if you want to. I guess the difference between a pawn and a cube, I mean, I'm a little bit shaky on exactly what that would be. Let's actually go look at the pawn. Yeah, let's fucking go. When you're unsure, you go into the source and check it out. Let's go into pawn here.
Doesn't pawn inherit from actor?
It does, yeah. So yeah, absolutely, a pawn is an actor. That's true.
Okay.
I think it has some sort of, it has a movement component by default, so that's good. So it has, I think it's just like a helper class that has a bunch of useful things for moving around and stuff like that. So it has like, it uses controller, rotation, and yaw and roll. It has that stuff sort of built into it. It has like an input enabled here. I think it might have a pawn make noise. Okay, I don't know what that does, but okay, that seems dangerous. It has like a controller here, so it has like it has a reference to which controller it's being controlled by. So I think it's like it's not necessarily that you have to use a pawn. I think that's actually a really good observation that you made there. That it's not necessary that you use a pawn, but it wants you to use a pawn. Like, it has sort of like these helpful functions to be like, oh, if it's, am I being controlled right now? If you're using a blackboard to make AI trees, behavior trees, they are sort of assuming that you're using pawns. So a lot of stuff in here is to help you use it with behavior trees and stuff like that.
But in general, we should think about actors as like inanimate objects and pawns as stuff that's moving around, and like, I don't know, NPCs, players, or
No, I think you should think of actors as you can do anything with those. Like, you know, actors are not necessarily static; they can move around and stuff like that as well. I think with pawns, I will be honest. I haven't used pawns that much. Like, as I said at Hayslap, you just completely fucking ignore them. So I won't be like, you're supposed to do exactly this, but I will speculate. I think Unreal wants pawns to be always possessed. Like, they don't want pawns to move around on their own. Pawns are supposed to be possessed and controlled by a controller. Like, that's how they sort of are designed. So yeah,
so either like, AI or control or player control.
Yes, exactly. Pawns are there to be controlled by the player or by AIs. But don't take my word for it. don't quote me on that. I mean, pawns are like, I mean, it's a huge class. It's like 500 lines in the header alone, and then there's character, which is what we're actually gonna inherit from, and that's like character with the capsule and some sort of concept of jumping and stuff like, and swimming, and it's like, oh fuck, like there's so much stuff in the character. It's truly insane. And so what we're actually gonna inherit from is the character class, which inherits from pawn. And here's where I mentioned that Unreal does the inheritance paradigm, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but it's fine. So yeah, character inherits from pawn. So yeah, a character is a type of pawn that includes the ability to walk around. So that's how they are defining what a character is. So it has very useful functions like jump. You can set like, oh, can I double jump? And you can fly, you can swim. So it has like helpful stuff like that in it. So, you know, I guess that's nice. Thank you, Unreal, for making something like that. Yeah. So that's player controllers and pawns. So we want to make a new pawn for ourselves, one that can move around and jump. And then how nice, there's a class for that already, ability to walk around character. So we're gonna make our own character pawn. Very nice. So I will just go in here in C++ classes, and I'll just make a new character here. So I'll just override that, and I'm gonna call it fuck character. Gonna create that class. By the way, is it okay for everyone if we go a little bit longer today, since I was late? So I was thinking maybe going like an hour longer or something.
Sure.
Alright, cool. Just ping me or anything if that's not if you need to go something or do something, then we might just take the time somewhere else. Okay, so you created a character, so that's cool. Okay, I will say this. Another reason I don't really like creating classes from Unreal, especially in the beginning, I would actually recommend it to you guys to not use the Unreal class generator, because if you get all of this stuff generated for you, like uClass and generated body and generated.h, you are not consciously aware that those are there. Like, you're not actively trying to remember to do these things, like what they mean. So I would actually highly recommend write this stuff yourself. Like, I'm always a very big hater of copying code, always. Even if you're writing exactly the same code as from Stack Overflow, write each line itself, because that it gives you a chance to make mistakes, like you're forgetting stuff and then you have to consciously remember. And it also imprints it into your brain when you're writing it, to be like, okay, I'm actively writing fuck character.generated.h. That will put it in your brain that that's a thing. When you're just copy pasting, you're not making that connection. You will easily forget about what these are, like that you have to write these things. So yeah, I'm heavily encouraging not to use the class generator. Write these out yourself. That will make you remember.
Okay, so when you were creating files before directly in the project, you just had to create 2 new files and name them .h and .cpp.
Yes. So you just go in here and just make these 2 files. Actually, I'm gonna do that. Fucking let's get rid of this. let's just make them ourselves. So I'm just gonna make. Let's close this down first. Yeah, so you just go in here into fuck. Actually, yeah, let's make a new folder. Actually, let's do like player. I'll make a new folder. Whoops. And let's make the files in here instead of these 2. Player, fuck player, h. Fuck player. This also gives me a chance to sort of introduce one function at a time, so we don't get like this huge file that I have to explain everything in. I can take it one step at a time. So yeah, one major downside for this is that since they are using filters in Visual Studio, they don't show up here. So they actually we have to remake the project for them to show up in a Solution Explorer. But them showing up in a Solution Explorer is not mandatory. You don't need to have them here. You can still open them up and recompile, and still works just fine. It's another reason why I like to use Sublime, because Sublime just looks at the folder structure, and I don't just search for the file and it's there. But yeah, I open them up in here in Visual Studio. So in the header, always remember pragma once. If you forget, you'll be sad. So we're gonna make our class our a fuck player, public a character, like so. What does the a mean? What does the a stand for?
actor.
Yes, exactly. Very good. So I will include, and let's say I don't know where character is right now. I happen to know, but let's say we don't know where a character is. What I usually do is I use search for the file. I just search for character. If I can do a symbol search as well, maybe that's better sometimes. So I'll symbol search for a character. You can do that by Shift Alt S. So then you do a find symbol. So let's search for a symbol, a character. And here we'll see, okay, here's a character, the class. It's defined in file.h, in character.h. Conveniently, the directory is just out of reach. I'll just scroll over here. Why is it cutting it off? What the fuck? Okay, what? What happened? Okay, at least. There we go. Okay, thank you. And there we go. Okay, so the directory is this huge thing. It's like engine source, runtime engine, blah blah blah. The important thing you're looking for is classes. What classes means is that this is the folder, like sort of the root include folder for a module. So in this case, you don't really have to know, but I know that engine is the module name here. So engine is the module, and then classes is where the module defines which classes this module has. So I know that this game framework here is going to be the root. So if I want to include stuff, I will have to type game framework. That's going to be the root of the module. So in this case, I know, okay, it's a character inside of game framework in the engine module. So I just type include game framework / character.h. So that's how I know. Another giveaway if it's let's say if I do like S box or something. Another one is this public here. So that's another way to see that this is the root directory of a module. So in this case, it's the slate module. So slate public. So if I want to include sbox, sbox.h, then I know it's in the slate module, and I have to do widget / layout / box.h. So I know because the public is the root. So that's a nice way to find out what the include path of something is. Another way is to just do Alt Shift Q to bring out the refactor list, and then you can do add include character.h. Yeah, that worked great. So so don't use that because that doesn't really work. So yeah, then you can just, remove all of this. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But yeah, that's another way to do that. But yeah, I usually just do a symbol search to just find out where it is. And then I look for public or classes. And then we have to include something else. Do you guys remember what I'm gonna include to get this to work?
Generated .fuckplayer.h, was it?
Not exactly. Do you guys remember
Something
what
with generated.
Yeah, it is .generated.h. What is the full?
Fuck.generated.h?
That's
Fuck?
shouldn't it be fuckplayer.generated.h?
Yes, exactly. Fuckplayer.generated.h is always the file name, exactly the file name here. So the fuckplayer.h, then it would be fuckplayer.generated.h. So exactly the same file name, but just with a .generated. So very good.
What is that?
That's where Unreal puts generated code. So since this is C++ and not C# and a nice language with nice, what do you call it? Reflection code, exactly. So reflection code is the meta code of the code. So, in C# I can get the class to get like the exact name of the class. I can get all of the methods in the class. I can get all the properties. I can get the metadata of the properties. I can get all of that stuff in C# natively. In C++, nothing of that is there. It doesn't generate any reflection code. But it's important, like, I need to be able to call it from blueprints. You need to be able to hook up to the function pointers and stuff. So it has to generate reflection code itself. So Unreal does that. It adds reflection code. However, it needs to be included in the class. It needs to put code inside of our class to get the reflection code. And that's what this generated.edge code does. It has all of the generated code in it, so that we can then put it in the class. And how do we put it in the class? Do you guys remember? What do we have to type in here to put all of the generated code that Unreal does into our class? What do we type?
Generated body.
Yes, exactly. This is a macro that inside the generated.h, it will define this macro to be, you know, whatever code needs to be inserted into our class here, so that when we compile, this will be expanded out to like a bunch of shit. Okay, what more? What have I forgotten as well?
The U class declaration.
Yes.
Above.
So this U class will expose our class to the engine and mark it as this class is significant. You need to generate code for this and generate reflection code. So that's what this U class does. Cool. So let's compile this actually to see if it works. Hit compile. There we go. Great. So now I should be able to place it out. So if I go fuck character. Oh. Oh, there it is. Fuck player. Why is there a fuck character as well? I don't know what this is. Anyways, fuck player. There he is. So since we inherited from a character, we have like a nice capsule. We have a little arrow here, a little dinger donger that's pointing where we're going. It has a character movement component, so that's very good. Here's like, you can see there's like a billion fucking floats. Like here's where the spreadsheet comes in. There's like fucking so much stuff that we can set. Nav mesh, we can set like touch force, and I don't even know what that means. Rotation rate, and it's crazy. So yeah, this is a huge component that handles every Unreal movement. So that's cool. It's actually used for like entertainment and for educational purposes. Actually, go and check out this generated file since you guys were asking. It might be good to actually just have a look at it just to see kind of what it is. I think it's here. Fuck editor developments engine.
Can't you also control click on the actual header file?
I don't think it knows where it is. Let's try. No, it doesn't know where it is. Yeah.
Right.
Because it sort of gets like inserted in. Let's just search for it. Let's do the fuck player. Whoops. Generated. I always forget where it is. There it is. So let's open it up and take a look at it. So yeah, it's horrible. So it's just like all of these, like here it's like defining some sort of macro for yeah, this seems to be that it's declaring the class as like a U function, U class thing. So here's where this probably will insert code into the engine to register the class. So it's called like script fuck. That's like the name inside of the engine of the class. We could probably move down to be like here's like a default constructor that it makes, like an object initializer constructor that it's making for us. This is probably generated because we didn't have actually a constructor in our class yet, so it might be generating one automatically. There's a bunch of pragmas and stuff, and there's like a static class. So if we want to get the U class, so U class is a U object that's defining our class. So this is sort of the reflection of our class. So this will be in C#. This would contain the name. It will contain the methods and all the properties. So this is the U class in Unreal that has those things in it. So this contains the reflection of our class, and it has a nice getter, like a static class. So that's how you get the reflection code for your class in Unreal. It's very nice. So yeah, this is horrible. And then it's probably also a generated.cpp we can search for. Maybe, maybe not. So maybe there's no code that actually needed to be generated, but it will generally also be a generated.cpp that contains C++ code that needs to be compiled for calling blueprint functions, calling stuff like that. So that also gets compiled in. So yeah, there's a pipeline going on behind closed drawers that luckily we don't really need to worry that much about. All right, either way. So let's make a we don't actually need to do anything right now. Let's actually make it so this is what's getting spawned when we play the game, right? Because if I place this out and I play, then you know, okay, the player is here. Like you see, I can collide with him. Like there's this like sort of magic capsule here, but we're not possessing him. Like by default, they are not getting possessed. I'm still spawning this like default debug camera and possessing that one. So we actually need to set our new fuck player to be the to be the default the default player. The one that should spawn in the player start. And we do that with the game mode. So remember, the game mode is the object that contains all of these default classes. I'm sorry, by the way, we're going a bit long. I'm thinking like it's lunch in 25 minutes. So I thought we'd just go the full 25 minutes and then take lunch, just because we started so late. So apologies for being a long session, but hopefully it's fine. So we want to make a game mode to override which default character to spawn, or default pawn, I should say, sorry, which default pawn to spawn to then possess with our player controller. So luckily it created a well, what was that? It created a game mode for us already. This fuck game mode base. So so that's cool. So it's already created a game mode for it. It hasn't overridden anything, but we have the game mode. So if I look in the class a game mode base, it has a bunch of stuff. It has like init game. So actually the game mode does a lot of more things than just being the class. The classes, it actually has this bunch of stuff like init game state, and it has stuff like get number of players, start play, has match started. Here's like match stuff for like the Unreal Tournament things. So it's like set pause, clear pause, allow pausing, is paused, reset, return to main menu, host. It has like so much shit in it. Like the game mode is one of the most bloated classes in the game, I think. In the engine. It's like changing names of controllers. It's like, why is that in the game mode? so it's really weird. So I think like if you want to go full Unreal, like it's like you open up your mind to the Unreal, to Sweeney, then a game mode I think controls like if it's like a death match, or if it's capture the flag, and it controls like, can you pause in this game mode? Can you so if it's like, you know, training mode or competitive and stuff like that, would be handled by the game modes. But I don't know, we don't use it in Hazelight. But here's the important ones. Here's the ones that we want to touch. So here's a bunch of T subclasses, and a T subclass of, and then it's like an actor. This is a class reference. So it's not a reference to an actual actor. It's the reference to the class of an actor. Another way to do this would be, I don't think I can change this. Oh, okay, whatever. I can just can't save. Another way to do this would be a class pointer. So these are just two different ways of doing sort of the same thing. The nice thing about T subclass of is it gets it makes nicer blueprint drop downs, because what you're doing is that you're narrowing it down to a class of a game session. So you can't just type any class in. It has to be a class that's overriding from a game session. While if you had a U class pointer, it would just like, you could select any class ever. So this becomes a little bit nicer to select. But these are sort of the same thing. It's a pointer to a class, essentially. I saved. Oh, thank God. I would have to like recompile everything. So yeah. So that's what T subclass is of. And as you can see, it has a bunch of C bunch of T subclasses. It has like a T subclass for a player controller. It has one for a player state, whatever that is. A HUD, a pawn, a spectator pawn, blah blah blah. It has a bunch of stuff. This is the one we're interested in though. There's a pawn here. So this is the default pawn class, and this is the one we actually want to override. So we want to set this T subclass off to be a reference to our new cool player, instead of being to the default pawn in Unreal. So we want to set this T subclass off. And the way you do that, I think, I actually not sure about this, so maybe I'll just make a horrible mistake and fuck everything up. The way I think we do this is what we override it in the constructor of our fuck game mode base, because the constructor is the place where you set all the defaults, right? So if we just make a constructor of our game mode, so I'll just do fuck game mode base, like so. Let's make a constructor, and I will create the implementation. Again, I'm doing that by Alt-Shift-Qing. You get like a nice, like easy menu here, and then it's usually a create implementation here. It's very nice. You don't have to type it out like the horrible C++ method definitions, which I hate. And in here, I will set the default pawn class to be our player. So I sort of touched on it a little bit in the generator.h, but again, the way you get access to the reflection, to like a pointer to the actual class, like the metadata of the class, is that you type a player, fuck player, and then colon, so you get the static variables or the static functions, and then you type static class. And that's how you get a reference to the U class of this particular class. And it's complaining because we haven't included this, so I'm just gonna include player / fuck player, and there we go. So to get the actual U class, like the reflection, a pointer to the actual class of an actor or a U object, you just do : static class, and that's how we get the pointer to that. And this was a T subclass off, but it will accept a class into there. So you can set a T subclass off. You can set that by a pointer to a class as well. So those two are sort of interchangeable. I shut down the engine on accident. Well, I didn't mean to do that. Let's just go. Okay, I need to shut this down because I changed it. There we go.
So you changed it in the editor as well, right? The default pawn class and the default player controller and stuff like that, right?
No, I have not touched it in the editor yet.
Okay, so this is the instead of that.
Yes, this is instead of that.
Okay, cool.
Now, if in reality, I will say this. I will spoil it actually. In reality, we probably want to make a blueprint version of our player, right? We want to add like a mesh, and we want to add like effects and stuff and audio. So we are going to make a blueprint version of our player, which means that we have to set the default class to be a blueprint class, which means we have to make a blueprint version of the game mode to reference the blueprint version of the player. So in the end, like this is going to have to be replaced. But I'm doing it now just to show you how to do it in C++. You have to know this, but even though in the end we're probably going to replace this to set this default pawn class to be a blueprint class. So we're probably going to override it later anyways, but still.
A player static class, do you have to type that? You can't just type this? Or why do you type that?
This?
Yeah. As compared to the keyboard, this.
You mean like that?
Yeah.
Well, what is this?
I'm assuming that's a fuck game mode.
Yes, that's a game mode.
Oh right.
And
Okay,
not only
never
that,
mind.
it's an instance of a fuck game mode. What this pawn class is expecting is a class. It's like a type of a pawn. It's not expecting like an instance of a pawn. Right.
All right.
So
Cool.
even if we were in FA player, this wouldn't work. But
And just
So
so I'm
still
like
good
sure I completely understand that, like the static class is getting a U class, which is an Unreal specific introspection thing
yes,
that it's like helping the engine identify the class.
yes, exactly.
So it's not an actual static class.
No,
right?
it's
Yeah.
called static just because it's like it's the static version of getting a class.
Yeah, okay.
That's
Do you,
why
do you
it's-
know what it actually is? Is it like a hash or like, what is it?
Well, I mean, we can go look at it. If we go into, we can kind of look at it. So here, a static class, it returns a U class. So if we go into U class, it's a U struct. Okay, so that's not very helpful, but hang with me here. So if we go into U struct, that overrides my U field. So that's cool. So if we go to U field, that returns, that overrides my U object. But if we go into U field, we'll get some sort of, we can probably see, this has like,
Wait a
has metadata.
U field contains a U class. Did I see that right?
No,
Oh
it
no,
gets
it's got
get owner
pointers to U
class.
classes. Okay, fine.
Yeah. But stuff like here has metadata, so it contains that sort of thing. So U field would be stuff like properties. It would be stuff like methods would be a U field. It would actually be a U function, but that would override from U field. So that's the base class of reflection. So essentially U field is reflection data for an object. So that's the base class for reflection. So that's why it has stuff like get owner class. So that would be like, what class is this tied to? So if U field was like, the reflection data for like a function or something, then owner class would be our player class. Get owner struct is the same thing, but it just gets the U struct instead. I actually don't know what U struct specifically is for, but it's probably a little bit more advanced. It's like, does it have metadata? That's stuff like, okay, is it like visible anywhere? Is it edit anywhere? Is it blueprint read write? Stuff like that. That's the metadata. That's what we type in the U function or U property or U class. You can set metadata if you want to, so you can change a class in runtime. Bool, that's probably used helper functions to get floats and stuff. Get class metadata. I'm assuming. I guess that's for, that's also helper functions. If you set metadata that points to a class, you can get that there, and so on. So this is like metadata for a field, and then that's get over by U struct, which is like if you're making a struct, that would be a U struct. So it has, okay, so children here, so that would be all the properties, all the functions would be in children here of a struct. Here's like child properties. I'm not exactly sure what that is. Some sort of like, okay, what is the size of all of the properties combined? What is the alignment? Yada yada, a bunch of metadata stuff. Here's like stuff to serialize a struct. So this is like this is native to C#. Like C# has serialization built into it, but in C++ that doesn't work. So a struct has a function here to serialize one specific struct. You can do find property. So if you want to be like, oh, I want to find this specific property, like for example in Unreal, that would be like, I want to find a property called speed, or a property called velocity in our case when we made like the little actor moving. Then you can find that metadata here, and so on. And inheritance, if you're inheriting, here you can get like the inheritance super, so you can get the parent class. So again, here's metadata, and then you can go one step up to here's U class, which inherits from U structs. If you're making a class, then there's some more class specific things, like is it cooked? You can probably get like reps. I don't really know what that is, but it's going to be class specific things in here. Here's function.
When you're talking about properties, are you talking about like properties that are visible in the Unreal? You're not talking about getters and setters, right?
Yes, exactly. So properties are not properties in C#. That's a really good point. When I say properties, I don't mean getters and setters. I mean just members that are declared as a U property, so that are visible to the engine. So when I say it's visible to the engine, that means if I got the U struct or the U class, I would be able to get an F property from that. I will be able to find it here in children. It will be visible to the engine. If I did not declare it as a U property, it would not be in there. It wouldn't know about it. It would just be like, oh, that's a C++ property. We don't touch those. So that's like, what it means to declare something as a U property.
Cool.
Yeah, so so static class would use get that pointer, so you can get that metadata. And if you have a U class, you can instantiate those, so you can spawn fuck player if you have the U class and so on. So that's what that's for. And the reason it's called static is because it is the static function to get the class. Because you can also, if you have like an instant of it, it's like my player. You can also do my player get class. So that will return the U class pointer of that instance. So that's why the static version is called static class. Cool. So that's Unreal. Welcome to Unreal. It's very, very confusing and scary. Right. Okay. So now we made our game mode, and hopefully that works. So if I play, I still get our default pawn because we haven't set to use our new game mode as the actual game mode. Because if I go into settings, project settings here, and then maps and modes, default game mode is still set to be game mode base. So if I just click this and instead select fuck game mode base, then hopefully if I expand this, yes, the default pawn class is now set to be fuck player. Because I set this fuck game mode base to be the one we're using. Another way to do this, if this was still game mode, or game mode base I would say, another way to do this would be to go into settings, world settings. So world settings is the settings for this particular level. Alright, so we have stuff like rendering audio. I've never been in here that much, but I know it's level specific settings, and we can set a game mode override for one specific level. So we can say in this one level we're doing fuck game mode base. So we can either set the default in here, or we can override it in the world settings. But I'm gonna set the default because if we create a new level, I still want to use our new player. But this will be for, if you're making a deathmatch level versus a capture the flag level, you would set the game mode over right here to be like, which kind of game mode is this map supposed to be? So that's what that's there for. But okay, cool. So now when we spawn, because if we're a bit higher up the ground, we can't move, which is a great indication that we are actually using the correct player. So we have successfully overridden which pawn to use. We are using our fuck player, which means we can't move. But that's good. If I spawn this a bit off the ground, so if I put the player spawn up here, hopefully when I play, we're falling down until we hit the ground. So we have gravity, which is also a good indication that we're using the character and we're not using like the default pawn, which means we have stuff like gravity and stuff. Cool, so we made our player, we made it possessable, and we made it spawn and stuff. So great. I'm gonna place it over here and actually set the rotation to be a bit different. I want to look at, yeah, I'll set the rotation to nothing. Cool. I'll take some last questions and then we'll go to lunch. So is there any questions about what we just did?
I guess, the player controller seems kind of daunting, like how much you can change and stuff like that. Is there a way to like make it not be a spreadsheet?
I mean, like in the player character?
Yeah.
No. I mean, the thing is, don't use it. It's the way to make it not a spreadsheet. But in the end, it's like you don't need to touch anything really. It's like we're gonna see it's gonna work completely fine out of the box. It's like if you want to change the run speed and jump height and stuff like that, we just search for it. We just like jump height to get rid of everything else. But in the end, like the Unreal movement component is incredibly bloated. It's supposed to be bloated because it's supposed to be sort of the fix all. Whereas like if you just want to go in and make a game, you're not supposed to be able to have to code anything. You just slap a character and you just use that.
Yeah, but it will also behave like a cookie cutter character, so
Exactly.
it will be like the same for every game. It will
Yeah.
all behave like an Unreal Tournament game. pretty
Exactly,
much.
it will be Unreal
Yeah.
Tournament. So that's why it's like you use it until you're like, okay, I'm done with this now, and then you make your own, and then you're like, you know,
All right, cool.
then you're in deep shit, but it's fun. But that's
Yeah.
what we do in Hastelight, of course. We don't use the character at all. We just make our own movement components from scratch. We do all of the traces and all of that sort of thing, collision solving ourselves. But yeah, that's what you do if you want to make it like a game for real that doesn't feel like a real tournament. Good question.
In the project settings.
Yep.
For the default game mode. I think I might have missed something. The one we created doesn't show up there for me.
You mean the fuck game mode base?
Yeah, exactly.
Is it in your projects?
Yeah, it's in the project. It's compiled. You restarted the engine, but it doesn't show up for me.
Really? Can you share your screen?
Yes, let's see.
Let's close down Pornhub first.
Never.
I need it for concentration.
There we go. Is it sharing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have the same naming convention as you did, so I replaced fuck with test.
Okay, that's a good call. Okay, first course game mode base. All right, cool. Looks good to me. And then if we go into Unreal, and I use so what happens now if you drop down there? What is right there? First course game mode base.
Oh, there we were. Jesus Christ.
Oh, well,
I was searching for the wrong thing then. Sorry.
Problem solved.
Oh yes.
All right, cool.
Thank you.
No worries. Great. Okay. So
we just one more question.
yeah, of course. Yeah.
The game mode base, like that's mostly for the character. So you can make it like the game mode itself, right? In that, but you don't have to, or
you have to use the game mode, unfortunately. There's no way to get around the game modes. But of course, in Hastelight, I think we make a game mode and then we make like a dummy player controller and a dummy pawn. So they just spawn. And then we're just like, okay, go away now. It's like, we don't want you. So we just like put them in a corner somewhere. And then we actually spawn whatever we want to spawn. We use our own player spawners to spawn our own players and stuff like that. But I think that's the worst part of Unreal. I wish there was like an Unreal version where you didn't have a game mode. Where it's like you started the game and just nothing happened. Where it's like it doesn't do any possession or anything. And then you can do your own completely from scratch. Unfortunately, you can't do that now. It's sort of required, but yeah, it is what it is, I guess.
right. So hack solution will solve it if I want to make my own thing.
Yeah, if you want to make your own thing, I do recommend making like a dummy, like a dummy game mode that spawns a dummy player controller with a dummy pawn. That's what we do.
All right.
Thanks, Unreal. Thanks, Sweeney. We have like at work we have like a picture of Sweeney as an emoji. Sweeney is like the founder of Unreal Engine. He wrote the original source code. We have like a picture of him like as an emoji. He's like shaking. So whenever it's like Unreal is like giving us trouble, it's like we see like 7,000 shaded compiles, then we post like Sweeney shaking. And we like Sweeney.
Why?
That's how we ventilate. Yeah,
nice.
It is what it is. Cool. All right. So let's take lunch. So I'll see you guys back at 1. Hopefully refreshed and ready for more beatings. So yeah, see you in 1 hour. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye bye.